Hi. So in this video, if you've clicked on it, you know what the topic is. And I just want to begin by saying that if I was a public figure in Australia or if I was a member of a political party, I would probably follow the popular orthodox opinion that the Chinese claim to the South China Sea is incorrect and should be opposed and disputed in international courts and tribunals, and that it isn't recognised and so on. But I just thought it would be interesting because some people might be thinking about this issue in a certain way because they've been programmed by the media to think about it in a certain way. And so first of all, I just want to say, my only experience with the South China Sea is flying over it a few times and looking out the window and just seeing this expanse of water. And just as it seems a little bit kind of ridiculous to be talking about who controls water and who controls ice in the case of Antarctica, it is like something that I haven't actually got into personally. Like, I've never been through it on a boat. But I just wanted today to talk about the history of it and to talk about the whole thing in terms of how I would see it. So let's go back to the European age of exploration, so back to Vasco da Gama. So before Vasco da Gama did his voyage, I think it was in 14 something, the South China Sea was just unknown. I mean, Vasco da Gama didn't journey into the South China Sea, but on the eve of the European voyages of exploration, when Vasco da Gama went up to India and along the coast of Africa, and that was it was an unknown sea. It was completely unknown to Europeans. Now, what happened after that? After that, the Portuguese pretty much turned it into their lake. They had a colony in Macau. They had trading posts. Well, trading posts is probably the best way of putting it. They had trading posts surrounding it, and their ships were running through it. Next, you had the Spanish, the Portuguese. So really, in terms of effective control, the South China Sea has been a lake that has been controlled by many different powers. Just as you could sort of talk about the Mediterranean as being a Roman lake or the Caribbean as being an American lake, if you want to talk about the South China Sea, you're talking about a lake, a waterway that has been controlled by many different powers throughout its history. And so, let's go through it. So first it was the Portuguese, then it was the Spanish, then it was the Dutch, then it was the British, the French, the British, then it was the Americans. And in the 1970s, in the 1960s, when the Americans and other allies and the Japanese as well, they had it for a little while back in the World War II era. But if you want to talk about the most recent past, you would talk about the 1960s and the 1970s, when it really was an American lake. The Americans had their aircraft carriers there, and they were prosecuting their war against North Vietnam, and they had total control of it. In the year 2022, we have China as the biggest economy and the biggest power in the South China Sea, in the Asia region. Now, what is really being talked about here in terms of the South China Sea? It's to do with resources. That's a big thing. But managing a sea is also about managing the fishing. It's about controlling piracy. And it's also about search and rescue. So if somebody is in a yacht or a fishing boat or whatever, and they run into strife, who's there to manage it? Who's there to control it? Who's combating the pirates there? Who's managing the illegal fishing of the turtles or the sharks or whatever it is? So that's what you're really talking about. Now, what my personal idea would be is that you do accept the fact that China's got a lot of its trade running through it. So does Japan, so does South Korea, so do a lot of countries. But China, in a way, even though they're the biggest claimant, you could also argue, well, they do have the bulk of the trade running through it, and they are the biggest economy, they're the biggest population in the area. So my personal view would be an acceptance of the fact that they are the big boy on the block, and or the big country in the region, and to let them manage search and rescue for a start, let them manage the fishing, let them manage the piracy, the anti-piracy efforts, and see how they go with that. Because if you want to start World War III over anything, I think starting World War III over some water is really counterproductive. And if the Chinese show a willingness to manage those things and to do a good job, it could be really fantastic. It could be really, really fantastic. Because imagine a yacht race between Singapore and Hainan, or Singapore and Shanghai, or something like that. I mean, it's a huge waterway, and somebody has to manage it. Someone has to manage it. I again, like, I haven't sailed through the South China Sea, but I've heard anecdotally stories of pirates, how piracy is a problem, and if it could be a safe waterway with very effective search and rescue, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be terrific for Australia? Wouldn't that be terrific for everyone? And I began this video by sort of saying, well, look, if I was a member of a Labour Party or a Liberal Party or whatever, I would be saying something different, but I'm not. I'm a private citizen, and I'm entitled to present my view. And my view is that having sovereignty over waterways is a bit like having sovereignty over the winds. It's so difficult to do, and I come from a country, Australia, that claims so much of Antarctica, and sometimes that might seem a little bit silly in terms of just, well, it's a lot of ice. You know, the penguins are effectively controlling Antarctica. I mean, we can draw lines on little maps and stuff, but who's really there? Now, a lot of people might be very triggered by this video, but the purpose of this video is just to really say, like, things are not as simple as you think. Now, obviously, when it comes to the resources, that's something that's more difficult to manage. But there are other examples. If you look at the Mediterranean, or you look at the North Sea, where there's been compromises, or there's been some sort of, I mean, you could have the United Nations Convention on the Law. You could contain the mineral stuff to that, and those countries could purchase licenses or leases from each other and so on. But I think giving the Chinese complete control of search and rescue, complete control of anti-piracy, complete control of fisheries management in the area that they claim, that could be a great compromise, and that could be something that leads to improvements for everyone involved, in all of the claimants involved. So it's very interesting. It's an interesting intellectual exercise to sort of unpick these seemingly untractable problems, but that would be a solution that I would proffer. Yeah. But anyway.